On cold Miston hills, beast witsome and fell. In holdings and havens the bastles adwell. Seers know the all, the start and the end, myths hushed aloud to which truth must bend. Aside vagabonds on snakeling trails, knights render these stories a wretched from their veils. For the oath, for the glory, through the sorrow and ache, the city, that quest to which no knight can make. Hello and welcome back to the SoloRolePlayers podcast. I'm your host PJ, and today on the show I am very excited for a long overdue first look and hopefully very soon actual play sessions of Chris McDowall's Mythic Bastionland. Now this book has been on my shelf for more than a little while. I got it in the original Kickstarter. It is my first Chris McDowall book. Chris is known for Into the Odd and Mythic Bastionland, among other things. He has been in the RPG scene, writing and blogging. He is a prolific blogger about all things RPG. Over at bastionland.com, I believe it is. You'll find out more about that soon. But this is my first experience with one of his books, and I backed it. I can't even remember what it was that drew it to me in the first place. It was one of those projects that I think it was the art that drew me to it, and I backed it. It was in the early days of me backing stuff and discovering RPGs, and when it came, I couldn't quite believe how beautiful it actually was. I immediately then did an interview with Chris, and Chris, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry it's taken that interview so long to come out. That'll be out next on the SoloRolePlayers podcast. It was done quite a while ago when I got this book, and I really, really wanted to have a chance to actually look more closely at this book before I put that interview out so I could sort of do them together. And again, Chris, I'm sorry it's taken so long, but happily, everything you had to say then is still relevant now. For this, what I have been hearing in the scene is a really great game in general, and also great game to solo. So for those of you new here, I know we have new people all the time. Welcome. This is one of my formats that I do for the show, which is basically where I experience an RPG for the first time out loud in the way that I generally experience it. And that is that I tend to pick up a book that I want to play and go through and sort of half learn the rules, half discover what it is, and half build up a bit of a story or setting or quest or something like that in my head, some ideas of characters as I go, before I actually sit down and play and then continue to learn the rest of the rules through play. It's a method that works really, really well for me. It's been working fantastically for me to get books off my shelf because I, like a lot of people, or at least maybe it's just me, I struggle to sit down and learn a book, learn a rule system. You know, I start getting distracted and excited when I'm reading about mechanics and things, and I want to just get into the playing. I find when I changed that mindset of having to learn an entire rule set first and just started playing and learning through play, I started getting a lot more books off my shelf. So if you're new to the show, that's a big part of what I've been doing over the last 18 months of this show, and will continue to do so. So that is what this first look is. I plan to then follow it up with an actual play. Where exactly that fits in, I'm not sure yet. This month I want to do my first look of Mythic Bastionland and bring you that interview with Chris. And also we're going to have over in the SoloRolePlayers Patreon Discord, Mythic Bastionland is officially going to be our book club book for this/early next month, depending on when this comes out and how much time people have to play it. So, without further ado, and without reading any more poetry, let us get into Mythic Bastionland. Now, I usually don't have any fixed structure for how I do this, but I think it might be useful to me to start to make a bit of a structure, both so it's a bit clearer for you, the listener, what I'm going through, and also to sort of keep me on track as I don't waffle off into the distance, as can happen. Having procedures is good. So the first thing I'm just going to look at is the aesthetics of this book. I find that the aesthetics play a huge role to me in my imagination of the kinds of stories and worlds and characters that come out in my head in these first look sort of sessions, which then ultimately go into and have a big impact on the experience that I have in the game. And how aware of it I've been in the past, I'm not sure, but the more that I do this, the more I realize that the aesthetics have a big deal. Now, this is just an absolutely gorgeous A4 style book, so full-sized RPG book with beautiful, I'm going to say Gothic, I don't know what the actual typeset is, but beautiful text on it. And the inside cover has just a collection of, I'm assuming they're knights or myths in here, and just, yeah, the art in this is absolutely stunning and is what drew it to me in the first place. It's the game and layout is by Chris McDowall, with Alex Sorensen doing the illustration. And it is just wonderful. Bastionland.com is the resource. We can get the character sheets and other resources. I will be doing that and printing them out shortly. And yeah, the way that this book is laid out is part of the aesthetics, actually. And what it appears to be is really a handful of single spread pages, as in each... I love this. I've been doing a lot of OSE recently, and and Dolmen Wood as well, and I love it when the layout is just clean like this. But in this case, it appears to be that each page is a rule or a mechanic. For example, travel is a single A4 page. Creating a realm is an A4 page. Exploration, so on. Beautiful. And then we have to go into some random tables with nature, civilization, people, and combat, into the myths, and we'll get to that. And then that appears to be most of the rules. And then the next, from page 31 to page 160-something, is myths, with a myth on one side and a knight on the other. And I have no idea how these systems interact just yet, but I'm very excited to see how they do. So a bit of getting started and a bit of background. We have the usual stuff here. One player is the referee. They should read through to the end of the rules section, which is page 21. That's not that much. However, when you're the solo role player, you don't actually need to know all the rules before you start. Another one of the benefits of this hobby. The very next thing it says is that you should consider the start and scope. And the start in this case is the opening situation that you find yourselves in. There are 3 starts. And then you have your scopes, which is how long a game or a campaign you plan it to be, running from one session in an adventure to a known number of sessions in a chronicle, or to a saga, an indeterminate amount of sessions, being an open-ended sort of play. And I really like that idea, it putting that up front to ask you that question. What do you want to do? Do we want to try a one-shot? By the look of it, it gives you then a structure and a framework to work within that scope. That, I think, is really, really important, especially for GMs out there who are trying to get their players off 5e, or, to try a new game or something, and you can say, hey, let's do an adventure that's only 1 session, or let's do a chronicle that is 6 sessions, or something like that. For the solo role player, I think it's also useful because we often have the trouble of not finishing stories and campaigns. We start on these big, broad, sandbox, open-ended things, and it's really fun and fantastic, and then there's so many games to play that sometimes, or often, we don't finish them. So I like that idea that we can choose a scope, and I think what might be fun to do is actually try and complete an entire scope. Try and complete an adventure. That's what I'm going to do. I'm also going to choose my, again, playing while doing, I'm also going to choose my start at the moment. We can either be a wanderer, and this is, again, the starting situation. A wanderer is a young knights errant. They have particular stats, and they arrive in the realm seeking glory. Good. We could also be a courtier, who is more mature, so they have better stats, by the look of it. And they have a place in the court and the seat of power. The first omen of the nearest myth is delivered as news to the court. It could be interesting playing as someone a bit more mature. And then the ruler is the mature knight, and this is where a knight rules a holding and the others are in their circle. So that could be cool if you're playing in a group and you actually have an established castle or something like that. I think, against my initial impression, which was, hey, let's be a wanderer, we don't have any direction, so on and so forth, maybe it's cool to start as a mature knight where they're already running things, and the first omen of the nearest myth is delivered as news to the court, and our knight then has been pushing paper for quite a while, let's say. There's been peace in the realm or something like that, and our knight has been pushing paper around and feeling that sort of itch of age creeping into them, and that itch for glory and the former glory of their younger days. And I think, inadvisedly, when we get whatever this myth is, that we decide that this is our chance to get back out there and have one more adventure before we settle down to the boring pen pusher's life. I'm immediately, and here you go, this is a bit of a scope into my process. I'm already excited, so I'm going to go ahead and roll up what myth this is. We might even just sort of make a character quickly on the sly. Now, I do remember when talking to Chris, he said that there is a specific number of myths and knights, so you can actually roll on them, which is exactly what I intend to do. Here we go. There are 6 by 12 myths. Fantastic. So that is what we're going to do, and then we're going to see what our myth is, and then figure out our knight. See? Already playing. So, 6 and 12... we get a 4 and a 4. So there are 6 tables with 12 entries each. So we go to 4-4, which is the Spectre. Each myth lists its omens and the cast of beings who are associated with it. Good. Entering or exploring the myth's hex always reveals its next omen. Excellent. I don't know how hex crawling works yet, but I'm excited that it's in it. Remembering the primacy of action, don't know what that is yet. The hex itself is visually tied to the myth. When the group feels that a myth is resolved, the knights each gain 1 glory and a new myth replaces it in the next season. Myths may appear at odds with their realm, such as the sea in a desert. Still, these myths must be brought to pass so realm and myth can shift as needed. Okay. I don't yet know the shape of this world, but this is already very exciting to me. The fact that you have a clear goal in a specific hex, by the looks of it, and you're going to go to this hex, resolve this myth, and then you get a new myth. Really, really like that. We have things to look up here, which is the primacy of action on page 16. But before that, let's just look at what this myth says and see what it tells us. This is the Spectre. The Spectre. Haunted souls find no sleep in bed or rot or grave so deep. And I'm not going to go too much into this because I don't yet know what it is. But what I have here is a list of omens, which again is 6, so I guess it could be rolled. That's good. Let's just read an omen, and we'll figure out what that is later. A black hawk perches, then howls like a wolf before flying into the distance. I don't know if that is what's happening in my court, in my office, when this thing happens. But that's cool. We're going to go back and figure out about that. And it also has a cast, which is we have some stats here, so I guess there's some NPCs in there, so on. Good. Mortal afflictions, dwelling, sanctum, monument. Okay, good. So what this is looking like to me is it gives you a really nice sort of outline of what this thing is, especially for a GM or as a solo player, to sort of spark the imagination without it being like a set piece or something like that. So let's go back and start looking at the rules a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do, actually, which I just read on that myths table, is to just roll up a knight. Which is the same system. We're going to roll a d12 and a d6. We get a 3 and a 2 this time, which is the Turtle Knight. Awesome. Love a turtle. And this is just going to be our knight. The Turtle Knight, this is a beautiful image of someone sort of hiding behind a very big shield, which is exactly, and looking at a turtle. Isn't that beautiful? A stand clad in shell by steed. No one of you will see me dead. Okay, cool. All right, so we already have gear here. We have property. We have a beak hammer. We have a drinking horn. We have an ability. We have a passion. We have an appearance of the drinking horn. And we have who we were knighted by. Fantastic. Okay, good. I'm going to print out a sheet now, and I think I'm just going to slowly start putting together a bit of a character, just so I can test the mechanics and sort of we can see that sort of thing a little bit. Okay, so I have gone and found a character sheet. I didn't actually use the official one. I just happened to find the first one that came up, which was just looked a little bit prettier, and it was the first one I found, and so I printed that. And then I also like that it has some of some reference on there, which is going to be useful to me. I also printed out the realm sheet and the site sheet, and while I'm not really going to play today, what I do want to do is just kind of simulate a little bit of play, sort of learning a little bit as we go. I did flick through some of the rules a little bit now, so you're not waiting for me to understand things. I just want to give you a little bit of an idea of what this game might feel like to play as the solo role player, or as a GM or a player. So I've gone through and I've made up a character. We have a lot of vigor, a little bit of clarity, and a bit of spirit. The GD I read earlier as gold is actually guard, and this is going to bring me into the mechanics and how they work. The mechanics of combat specifically are a little different, in fact quite different, and I really, really like them. We have certain feats that we can use in combat which add a little bit of flavor and color to it, but before we get into that, I just want to show you the core dice resolution mechanic. I'm also going to give myself a squire because it does say, it says that small companions of 2 knights or fewer may give each knight a squire. We are 2 knights or fewer. When I was playing, maybe I'd play 2 knights and 2 squires. Might sound fun. So they serve as apprentices. They're not yet knights. They don't gain glory or perform feats. And so they just have a sort of simplified stat. So let's just scribble down who our squire is here. They're going to get 1 guard, which we'll come back to in a second, and they're going to ride a pony. I'm not dealing with horse travel at the moment. We're just going to be walking. They have a dagger at a D6. There are a lot of rules in here that are really interesting, things for warfare and dominion and authority, and I'm just going to skip over those things for now. I just want to get that really basic feeling of this game and what makes it different. And so the core mechanics of the dice resolution of this system is going to be a D20 roll under, which is my favorite kind of roll. Always happy to see that. And it's simply rolling under your stat. The 3 stats that you have are vigor, clarity, and spirit. And it's really nice and simple. Vigor is strong limbs, firm hands, powerful lungs. Clarity, keen instinct, lucid mind, shrewd eyes. So for awareness checks, that kind of thing. Do you see the spirit in the trees, whatever. And then spirit is charming tongue, iron will, and fierce heart. And so your standard RPG stats have been condensed a little bit into these 3 things. And I think that's perfect. I think that's really, really nice. These stats are also going to go up and down based on how you get injured or affected in the world. So they're not a fixed value. In fact, it's mostly your vigor, which acts as your ability, your strength, your fighting capacity, but it also is going to act as your health. And if you do take damage worth more than half your vigor, you're mortally wounded and are going to die in an hour unless you get patched up. That kind of thing. So you're starting out strong and potentially getting weaker as a fight goes through. The way that the combat actually works is that, as I said, the core mechanic is rolling what's called a save, which is rolling a d20 below the stat. In combat specifically, however, you're going to take all of the attack dice noted on all your weapons shield, granted any bonus, for everyone involved in the fight. So say, let's find some sort of enemy here. We have some cutthroats. Colin, Fear, Elgin, Ness, and Rune. I've just flicked to a random myth here. So one of them has a long knife, say. D6. So say we're fighting against this Colin here, the cutthroat Colin. Colan. And we take all of the attack dice noted on your weapons shield and granted bonuses. Now, I'm going to be attacking with my beak hammer, which is a D6, and my squire is going to be attacking with his dagger, which is also a d6, and everyone involved in the attack is going to roll their dice together. We get 2 6s. That is excellent. Now, at this point, what happens is, let's say we had a different size die in there as well. But what happens is you're going to take the highest value die and deal that as damage. Super simple. Really, really, really like that mechanic. My first thought was, well, what happens if multiple people are involved? I mean, that's perfect for the solo role player. But if you're playing in a group and you're rolling and your dice is never doing any damage, that might be annoying. However, there are other things you can do. You can spend dice rolls that you aren't using for damage in order to give yourself some advantage, to do a gambit. And a gambit is when attackers may discard any number of attack dice of 4 or higher to perform a gambit, each one causing the effects below. So for example, we could bolster the attack, adding +1 of the total damage. We could move after the attack, whereas in the normal rules you must move first and then attack. We could repel a foe away, stop a foe from moving next turn, impair a weapon on their next turn, which brings its attack down to D4. That's pretty cool. We could trap a shield until the next turn or dismount a foe. Okay, so let's say we're fighting against this Kolan guy and we want to impair his weapon. So A, this is really good for solo roleplay. I'm imagining how I'm impairing this weapon. We've been come across at our camp by this cutthroat, and he might be a little drunk. He shouldn't be out here by himself, and he feels like he can maybe slit our throats while we sleep and steal our things. Unbeknownst to him, we are awake. Or this might be a place where we make a save. I'm going to roll on clarity, which is like awareness, perception, that kind of thing, to see if we notice him in time to get the first attack in. Now, this is an important thing about failure, and it does mention this in the rules. Failing a save doesn't necessarily mean a failed action, it just means a negative consequence. So it's not going to be if I fail this save, my throat gets slit and I die. But if I fail this save, maybe we are surprised in the combat and they're going to get to act first, okay? So I rolled an 8, which is underneath my 9. So my turtle, as yet unnamed turtle knight, is dozing by the fireplace with his squire, dozing by the campfire with his squire. His old wizened skills and awareness sort of make him realize that someone is creeping around, and he's sort of sitting there and just still sort of pretending to be asleep while reaching his hand down to his beak hammer and sort of nudges the foot of the squire as well. In fact, we're going to see the squire. If the squire notices 2, doesn't matter. We don't need stats for them. Did the squire have stats? Yeah, 2d6 for each virtue. So he has a 6 virtue. I roll for him, that's a 16. So he stays asleep and he's on the other side of the fireplace. So my as yet unnamed turtle knight slowly reaches his hand down to his beak hammer as he feels and senses someone creeping up on him. As he feels and senses they get close enough, he swings around, and in combat, unless you are surprised, the players get to act first. So now we're going to make that roll. Now it's only me doing this initial roll because the squire hasn't woken up yet. He failed the surprise check. So I'm going to say, and I don't know if this is actually possible yet, but for sake of showing the rule, I can use my shield as a D4 weapon, and I'm a turtle knight, and I have a hammer on the other side. So I'm going to turn around and try and swing and hit this guy with the shield, and then bash him with the beak thing. So we get a 4 and a 3. That is interesting because this means in order to do a feat, I need to discard a die of 4 or higher. But that would leave me with 3 for damage. However, that may well be worth it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm using my... it was on the shield I rolled the 4. So I'm using the 4 to impair the guy's weapon for the next turn. And I'm going to rule that says it... I turn around and I smash the guy with the shield and he drops the knife. And it's close enough to him that he could pick it up and attack with it next turn. Or it might take a turn. He will get it eventually. But what impaired means is that the attack, for whatever reason, only does a d4 damage. So I've turned around and I've smashed this guy with my shield. And then I have tried to sink my beak axe into his shoulder. And now the remaining dice on the table is a 3. And that is the amount of damage I'm going to do to them. Now, damage works is first you subtract armor. And then whatever damage is left over goes into their guard. And guard is basically like their stamina. I really like this idea. It's sort of hit points are always troubling a little bit. But basically, your guard is your ability not to get hurt. And once your guard is down, because you're exhausted or been outfoxed or whatever else, that's when you start taking actual damage, and it's actually dangerous. So I have done 3 points of damage. They had 2 guard. Their guard is now 0. You recover guard immediately after a battle or after a dangerous situation. And then one of them is going to go into his vigor. Now, I really like this because it means that you're always hitting, but there's a little bit more to it than just your, Mouse Ritter? Is it Mouse Ritter? Or Into the Odd, actually, which is another one of Chris McDowall's games, now that I think about it, which Mouse Ritter is based on, where you're just rolling damage and subtracting armor. To me, that always feels just one layer not interesting enough, somehow. People love it. It's great. I haven't played much with it. That's just my feeling on it. But this I like more, because this already, you're doing away with that, roll, miss, roll, miss, roll, miss, roll, hit, and the back and forth thing, which can be really frustrating in traditional RPGs, and especially in solo roleplay. You're doing away with that, but you still have some interesting decisions to make. I actually took the lower damage output in order to give myself that impair the weapon. Not only does that give me a strategic choice with the rolling and the choosing of the dice and the attack, but it also encourages me to picture what's going on. How am I impairing the weapon with the shield? Very cool. Really like that. So then they are going to get to go against us. They have a d6. They are attacking me. They roll a 3. With that, I have 3 guard, so that takes my guard down to 0. Now, in this case, I would probably use a die to track guard, or a dial. In fact, I have a dial. Love my little dials. I would probably use a dial to track the guard, because it's going to be going up and down a lot, right? So my guard is now down to 0. But that is the whole turn. So now we sort of picture what might happen there. I don't know if enemies are doing feats and that kind of thing. I know they can do... I don't know if enemies are doing gambits. I know they can do feats, and that is exactly what we're going to show now. So now my squire has woken up. And again, I'm attacking with my shield. Again, don't know if I'm technically allowed to attack with my shield and beak hammer at the same time. Although you can dual wield, because there are rules that say this is the only weapon. Like, if the weapon is hefty, you can only wield one hefty weapon at a time. Right? So if my beak hammer is not hefty, which maybe it is, my shield is, then I can still wield both of them, for example. So we now have a d4 for my shield, a d6 for my beak hammer, and a d6 for my squire's long knife. And we're all attacking together. We roll a 3, and a 4. Excellent. So the 3s are no good to us for gambits. And actually, it doesn't matter. We're just testing it. The cutthroat should have only rolled a d4 against me because I impaired him. That was the whole point. So maybe I didn't lose all my guard. Not important now. So now we have 3, and a 4. We could either do a feat. Now, a feat you can do once per action, once per attack. Each feat can be used once per attack by each combatant involved. So I can do 1 feat on my attack. And basically, a feat, it's almost like a spell or an ability. And it is that you can do it, and you can do it every attack, but every time you do it, you have to do a save, and if you fail the save, you become fatigued, and then you can't do any feats anymore until you rest. Now, I don't know if it just means you can't do that feat, or you can't do any feats. I kind of feel like you can't do any feats, and that's cool. I really like that mechanic because it means you're really deciding when you're going to do it. Like when you're going to use those feats and which feat to use. So using feats risks the knight becoming fatigued, which prevents them from using further feats. Exactly. Excellent. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to reroll my attack because I want to first smite. And you use this before making your attack roll, okay? And the attacker gains either d12, which is huge, or blast. Blast would be that you affect everyone in the area, like a big swing. So I'm not going to reroll my stuff, but I'm going to add a d12 to the roll now because I've used this smite, and I roll a 5. Excellent. So now we have more to work with, and we can see what we're going to do here. Can squires do feats? No, they can't perform feats. Okay. So I think what we're going to do here is pretty simple. I think we're going to bolster the attack. which is removing a die to get +1 to the attack. So we remove the 4, we add 1 to the 5, we now have 6, and we do 6 damage to their vigor. They have no guard left, so they're down to 3 health. I don't know if there's flee rules at this point. The guy might run away, but yeah, that's pretty cool. And then this guy is now mortally wounded. I don't know. I haven't yet read the part about fighting NPCs specifically. However, if this were a knight and they were taken to more than half their vigor, it's not clear to me whether it's half your vigor or half the remaining vigor, like more than half in one shot of whatever's left. I'm not sure. I think that's how it read, which is also interesting. And yeah, that's cool. And then I would have to roll to save to see if I've lost my smite ability. Pass a vigor save. Happily for me, I have vigor of 16, so I roll a 3, totally under that. I can smite again next turn, and so we go on back and forth. And that's combat, and that is really surprising. Surprising to me how subtly different that is, but yet how different it feels from, I think, any other RPG I've played. I mean, I've had dice pool systems before with Forbidden Lands and rolling pools of D6s, which I don't love. This, however, I really, really, really like this. I might absolutely steal this. Well, I don't know if it's stealable because of the whole bolster, move, repel stuff, but you could totally take those rules for one of those games where you're just rolling damage. Not sure. Anyway, really, really like how you're rolling dice, and then I love rolling dice and looking at them and then making a tactical or strategic decision what I'm going to do with what I've just rolled. I like that in board games. I really like that idea. So that is the basics of combat and the basics of doing the saves. Now, the other thing that I want to go through here is just a little bit about how the exploration feels. This is now a little bit more, not wobbly, but a little bit more, I'm not sure how it's going to go. The rules are intentionally quite open and interpretable when it comes to, not the rules, but the process and the specifics of encounters and things you find are quite open and interpretable, which can be really great. I think that's really great to GM because if you're the kind of person who likes coming up with stuff on the fly, that's perfect, and you can play this with very little prep, I'm sure. However, sometimes in solo roleplay, because we're dealing with a lot in our heads anyway, it can be a burden, I find, depending on the mood and the game, can be a burden to have to come up with everything ourselves. So let's just see. Happily, and the next thing I want to bring our attention to is some of the spark tables that we have, and they're not extensive. There's not hundreds of them, but there's a good amount. We have tables for nature, civilization, people, and combat. So, for example, let's roll up on people. We'll say that we've got this knight, or this cutthroat down to 3 health, and he's on the ground, and he's, we're both leaning over him, and he's yielding, basically. And so I want to ask something about him. We have appearance, voice, personality, relationship, desire, task, background, ailment, and heraldry. So what makes sense here? What is his task? What is he doing out here? And we have 2d12s, which is 11 and 1. He is out here to conceal a knight. Interesting. So then we could interpret that to why he is actually out here, and then we could work towards some sort of quest or give some flavor to the environment. Conceal a knight might be there is a rogue knight out here, and he is trying to, he's been sort of sent out to cripple or like take out any other knights around so that this knight gets the glory. That's a cool idea. And then we have like a rival knight in the area, so on and so forth. So that's nice for people. Seeing what their motivations are it's a really nice mix. Yeah, I like that. And then we would see his personality if we wanted to see what kind of interaction we had with him is ambitious and fashion. Okay, cool. So you can picture that. I also like that there is a combat table where you can roll up what weapons someone might have. Maneuver is really nice, especially, again, for solo play. If we were having this fight and we were in a duel, say, and we wanted to see what the enemy actually does, and we don't have an NPC attack table, stay tuned. I've been working on an NPC attack table I'm pretty pleased with. So let's see what the maneuver might be in a fight, and that is a jab and weaken. The intent is to weaken. So action and intent. That's really nice. So you can then picture then he goes to try and jab, and he maybe tries to jab me in the leg to weaken me and affect my movement so that he could go back with his bow. Something like that. Adding some flavor to that. And then we have obviously nature and civilization is very useful as well. So let's just quickly look at what a bit of exploration might be. There are two main types of exploration. There is hex crawling, which generally the map would be made, or the realm would be created by the GM in advance and not completely shown to the solo role player. I think it'd be pretty easy to do it as you go and discover things as you go. And then you also have sites, which is where you dig down deeper into a particular hex or site on that hex, which has really nice specific rules about how to do that, which I don't think I'm going to do now, but it's a really interesting way to create a little point crawl for a particular site, which I think would work really, really well for solo, and I'm keen to try that. I'm not going to create a whole realm now, but basically what you do is, I think it says in the book that you roll up and insert 6 myths into the area in remote locations. You put in some barriers, which I really like, which is like impassable areas. More interesting for when you're a player then and you get to a hex and you can't come forward. But I could easily put in a... so since there is 1 in 6 hexes have a barrier, so I think 1 in 6 hexes, does that mean in every hex there is a 1 in 6 chance that there's a barrier? Something like that. You could work out the odds. That could be cool too for exploration, because even if you know where your myth is, you still have to kind of get around the barriers to get there. And then there are 6 different types of landmarks. Again, Chris, I love that everything is, and I said this in the interview, everything is in 12s and 6s, so you can always roll on everything. Every time you're in a hex that evening, or you could do it at any stage during the hex, you roll to see if there is a landmark. There is a 3 in 6 chance of there being a landmark, and then you roll up which type of landmark it is, and they all have their own specific rules. So let's see this. I'm not going to design this whole realm yet, but I'm assuming that I'm 3 hexes away from my myth. Okay? Now, I move into a hex. Let's just go through the travel rules here, because they're pretty clear. Different if you're on foot or galloping or, whatnot. We're just going to be on foot. So it does specifically say that in general, the hex crawling and the traveling in this is zoomed out. You're going great distances over longer periods of time. A hex takes about a day to travel through, and you don't need to zoom in on all the little details of everything and doing stuff every single hex. But you are going to check a wilderness roll if you are sleeping out in the open, and that is a D6. A 1 is you encounter the next omen from a random myth in the realm. Now, this is a really interesting idea. Let's say we roll a 1 in this case. We know the myth that we are going to, but there are also these other myths in the realm, which we have put out on the map, perhaps, but haven't actually looked too closely at. So let's roll a random myth and read the omen on it. Now, I did this mistakenly earlier, and I'll explain why in a sec. So I rolled a 2 and a 10. That takes us to the myth, the ape, or the axe. I think it's the axe. The ark. Okay, the stylized text is wonderful, but it's hard to read sometimes. What I did before was I rolled on an omen because there's 6 of them, but that's not how it works. The omens are done in order. And so anytime you come across an omen for a particular myth, you go to the next one read. And that's a really cool idea because you're actually presumably progressing through some kind of a story or some kind of a feel, right? So we have an omen from a random myth in the area. And actually this would be, if I was playing this solo now, I would not pre-populate my map, like choose the myths in advance, but rather when we get from a random myth, then it gets added to my map. Yeah, or at least made a note on the side, and we're not sure where that is just yet. The first omen of the ark says, a coward sleeps on a branch, then a rumble in the ground followed by their cattle stampeding this way. So that could be the setup to a scene now. We're walking into this hex and we come across a farmland here. We might now, because this makes sense, because they have cattle. So let's say, well, this is then a dwelling, humble homes amid the wilds. So we've come across a dwelling and we have a handy little drawing of what a dwelling might look like. We can add that to our map now as a dwelling. And then we can play out a little scene. We wake the guy up. Why are the cattle running away? Are we going to help him get them under control? Is he going to get angry at us and blame us for letting them out, even though we didn't do it? You could play out some sort of scene there in as much or as little detail as you wanted, and then move on. Let's go to another hex, for example. Resource management, by the way, is specifically said not to be an issue. It's assumed that we find enough food, water, wood, or are prepared enough. In specific times where we wouldn't be prepared, then it says each morning, each night loses 1d6 vigor, I think, or one of the stats. You lose a little bit. So let's move into the next hex, and this time we're going to roll up a landmark. Encounter the hex's landmark, otherwise all clear. What that means is if the hex does have a landmark pre-written, then we could encounter it. If it doesn't have a landmark, nothing happens. So that's interesting. Then we might even ask, yes or no, does it have a landmark? Okay, and we say, yes, it has a landmark. Then we can roll up what kind of landmark. There are 6 things here. A 4 is a hazard. Nature fights your every step. Devise a solution, push through, and lose 1d6 vigor, or go back the way you came. So really nice, simple mechanic there. And again, we could, if you weren't into the story or imagining stuff and you just wanted to trek through some hexes, you could do that and just sort of say, yeah, the hazard is a marshy area and we lose 1d6 vigor. Or we can go to our spark tables here and see what sort of hazard it is. 3 is water, okay? This isn't how it says to do it, I'm just improvising here. Maybe there's been a flash flood in the weather and we're going to have to either push through here or go back to higher ground, and we sort of make that decision. We can play that out. We could make it more difficult or less difficult. We could say, devise a solution and push through. So we have to devise a solution. How are we going to get through this marshy water? Well, we put all of the stuff on the horse's back, and I, use my shield to sort of, figure out some solution to get through that. And that gives me, as the solo role player, a little opportunity to picture what's going on and come up with a bit of a solution. And you know what? If I can't come up with anything, I just go back the other way or just take the d6 loss of vigor. And then we're going to rest again. Now, what I'm less sure about is what happens when we get to an actual myth. I didn't read enough yet about myth hexes. Ending a phase in a hex with a myth always reveals its next omen without making a wilderness roll. When possible, the knights also get the drop on the omen. Okay, so say we've been traveling around, we've unlocked a few of the omens. What I'd like is a table for hazards or some spark for hazards. So we go to our omen, which was the spectre for 4, and not the omen, we go to our myth. Okay, and so presumably we've been traveling around and these omens have been popping up while we've been traveling. For example, we read earlier, a black hawk perches, then howls like a wolf before flying into the distance. And we know that we have to follow this spectre. Now, I would like a little bit more information on how to actually run these myths, because I see that there is a cast, the spectre, the Moth Knight, okay, that's our boss. There's also ghostly horsemen and sages close to death. Okay, so this might be, I don't know. I guess this is what the GM would just use to pull in these things depending on how the scene made sense to do so. Something also worth mentioning is that at the bottom of every page they have, oh, here we go, here's the hazards. I even knew that. So there at the bottom of every page there are dwelling, sanctum, monument, hazard, curse, ruin. And you could flick through the book and just pick one. You could roll up a random page. In fact, let's do that. Let's go back to our hazard and roll up a 7 and a 3, which takes us to another myth. So 3, 7, I have another myth. I'm not looking at anything about that. I'm just going straight down to the bottom and I read the hazard, which is rat territory. Cool. I could also choose a hazard from one of the known myths that are in there. To give it a little bit more connectivity, so on and so forth. So that's cool. I forgot about those little prompts down the bottom. Really cool. Then I could decide, am I ready to end my session? Am I ready to fight this boss? We come in and there is the Spectre, the Moth Knight, and Delsondo. It gives us stats for them. They have 7 guard, 15 vigor. They have armor. They have a 2/8 longsword and a shield. Regains her form as the myth progresses. Interesting, don't know what that means. Enraged by reminders of her failures and repelled by reminders of her successes. So this is where I might struggle a little bit more. I don't yet know, having not actually played into it a little bit, but this is sort of the point where it might become ask more of the solo role player to come up with what's happening here. And I don't know how much that gets resolved through the omens. I really don't want to read too much into them because I want to be surprised. I'm just glancing here. I don't see any specific mechanical stuff in the omens. They seem to be more flavorful sort of type things. So we would have to figure out a way to actually run these bosses. I don't know if it's always a boss, but there always tends to be, the Spider Lord, Wheel of Seasons, Guardian from the Star. It appears to be some sort of boss or challenge that you will face at the end of a myth, which makes sense. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how I do that. It does say in the book that when everyone decides a myth has been dealt with, then it is dealt with. So it doesn't have to be combat, I guess. When the group feels that a myth is resolved, the knights gain 1 glory and a new myth replaces it in the next season. So you complete a myth, however it may be, this one, it said she was something about a reminder of her failures or something. Maybe we come and we've learned some information through the omens or something, and we remind her of her successes, and she goes away and stops haunting things. That's not a combat then, but we have still managed to resolve the myth and get a glory and go on. The leveling up is interesting here. I don't know if we actually improve stats or anything. I don't think so. It just says your glory dictates your rank from 0 up to 12 glory. 12 being worthy of the city quest. I don't know if the city quest actually exists or it's just some cool headcanon stuff. Either way, I like it. Almost better if it's just cool headcanon. Everyone wants to be honorable enough to take on the city quest. And the more glory you have, it basically increases your standing in the world. So 0 glory, you are worthy of leading a warband. There are rules for full battle warband combat, which breaks everything down into a single stat block, which also looks cool, but I haven't looked that much into. 3 glory, which is where I started, is worthy of a seat in a council or court. Then there's worthy of ruling a holding, worthy of ruling a seat of power. So it's basically you're standing in the world, but it doesn't look like there's progression beyond that. I'm not sure how interesting that is to me, especially in shorter games, shorter campaigns. If there's no sort of sense of progression, I guess it is still a sense of progression, but there's no mechanical sense. You can get better weapons, but it does also say you're not tracking coin or anything like that. You're basically, most things can be traded for common things, and you just have to make it narrative. So yes, I will make you this suit of armor, but you have to, guard my farm for a month or something. It says, coins are only for the rich. Here it is, trade. Only the rich deal in coins. Most trade is an exchange of raw materials, goods, or service. If you hope to trade, you should have a good answer to the question, what can I offer that they would value? Okay, cool. But I guess it's just a different kind of game. We have games where we're leveling up and we're getting gold and buying magic items and this kind of stuff. That just isn't that game. That's cool. That's fine. The last thing I want to look at now, hopefully I've given you a bit of an idea of what this game feels like. The last thing I want to look at now is at the end of the book, I didn't realize what this was because I thought, there's more rules, but hang on. It says the rules are just at the beginning. This is actually a full set of examples and thoughts on every single mechanic, which is really, really cool. So why don't we take this opportunity to see if we can find myths and read through what the example is, and maybe that answers my question. This is cool. So this is this set of pages that says, what follows are the records of a single scribe, chronicled accounts with insight into their adjudication, that we might shed further light on the laws of this world. Cool. So this is basically the diary of a GM. Start and scope, character creation. What I want is teaching the rules. That's nice. Primacy of action, I mentioned earlier, and that's basically that you need to, as a GM, you need to respect the decisions that the characters made in the past. That's less of an issue for the solo role player. What I really want an example of, they have trade, advancing time, dynamic combat, great stuff in here, weapons. I do want an example of a myth. Is there one? Council and court, crisis. Unfortunately, there is not. The closest we get is omens. So I'm going to read through what this omens thing says and give us an idea of maybe more of the feel for this game. Play. The company are traveling through a barren tundra during winter, facing dire weather at every turn. Ref, the referee, makes a wilderness roll and gets a 1, rolling for a random myth for elsewhere in the realm. They roll the forest of which the company have already encountered the first 5 omens. This means they'll encounter the 6th and final omen. So the ref says, okay, The ref fumbles slightly, as the previous omens had all been encountered in areas with plenty of trees, an easy fit for the forest. The referee says, a bitter mist rolls over the tundra again, chilling your faces. Through the mist you can see shapes. It looks like a forest. A player says, I thought this whole area was a sort of frozen wasteland. The ref says, yeah, it was. Oh, I bet this has something to do with the forest, right? Yeah, shall we go in? I think we should. We're meant to be seeking the myths after all. I don't know why my characters are enthusiastic 10-year-olds. Okay, let's carefully go in. The referee says, as you enter, the mist becomes clear. The air feels warmer. Looking around, you feel like you're in the middle of a deep forest, despite having only walked a few paces into the trees. At least it's warm. A towering figure stands boldly between the trees. Their body is thick, writhing wood, knotted and gnarled. Their hands are like great clawed roots. The imposing creature looms over you. What do you do? Okay, so that sort of process is what we're doing in our head if we're trying to picture a scene and make sense of something as a solo role player. Cool, that's fine. That's sort of what I would have expected. Now, here is the thoughts on it, and this might be enlightening. Remember that myths operate under their own rules, and they don't need to follow the usual laws of reality. This is very useful for coming up with stuff. This means that situations like this one, where a myth's omen feels an odd fit for the current situation, can easily be woven into the ongoing story. It helps that, in general, the players want to find omens and resolve myths, as this is the main way that they gain glory. Besides, the nature of omens is that they're all going to happen eventually, so being caught off guard by one isn't a huge problem. I like that Ref doesn't try to contradict their previous descriptions of the area. The wasteland was just as frozen and inhospitable as when they'd previously described, and now it's miraculously transformed into a thick forest. One of the reasons that knights tend not to have magical feeling abilities is that I want the world to feel more magical than the people within it. You'll be exploring a mystical land, and while you'll sometimes benefit or suffer at the hands of its magic, you'll never quite understand it or control it yourself. This is perfect for handling these moments, but should never be done at the cost of previously established fiction. That goes back to that primacy rule. When they enter the woods, Ref jumps straight into the encounter with the fearmonger in their true form. This is fine, but there was also an opportunity to have the players explore this strange place a little before the fearmonger shows themselves. It would give a little more weight to the fact that the forest manifested so suddenly, allowing the players to take that in for a moment before thrusting them into a high-stakes situation. So yeah, it's basically just talking about, in this case, using the mythness of the world and the unknowability of magic to be able to twist the omens so that they make sense in the current situation. And then, yeah, ending in a fight. That high-stakes situation is one of those casts. And I guess you could pick and choose these casts, the cast members. I'm looking at another one now. The Inferno, for example, has its 6 omens. It has a cast. The main cast member is the Red Serpent with a snapping jaw and a whippy tail. It wants gold above all else and is willing to play the long game to get more. Okay, gives us some motivations. There's also a young farmer. Petty, smoke-damaged belongings, wants to build a new life forgetting the past. They could just be pulled in as an NPC when looking at one of the omens, for example. One of the omens says, smoke rises from behind a row of trees, a crackling forest fire burns. It can be stopped if the company acts quickly, else this small patch of forest burns down. Maybe they get there and there is this young farmer, Attain, already there. with their smoke-damaged belongings, trying to fight the fire, or maybe sitting crestfallen by the fire, thinking they can't fight it and they want to get out and make a new home, forgetting the past. Yeah, there we go. That is hopefully a bit of a feel and an idea of what Mythic Bastionland is. Now, there are rules that I did not at all go into. Warfare. The sites is really interesting, as I said. That's worth looking into yourself. That I think is a really cool method, which could be used anywhere actually, a really cool method for creating an explorable site on the fly. I mean, this tells you to do it in advance and make some decisions, but by the look of it, because again, we're dealing in sixes, you could do almost all of this completely randomly as you got there. And like before you get to a site, you randomly build out this site and then explore your way through it, discovering what's in there as you go. That looks really cool. There's also rules for dominion, ruling a domain, having a council, crises you have to deal with if you want to do that kind of knightly medieval stuff where you have a crisis roll and there is a dilemma. Choose between two crises. We have debt and panic, and you have to deal with that crisis. There is authority, mustering troops, succession, courtly conflict, conquest, and so on and so forth. Lots here to get into if you wanted to. I would be quite happy, and when I do start playing this, I will probably just keep it pretty simple, poke around in the system, throw in a couple of myths, see how that exploration feels, and see how, just aim to solve one myth and see how that goes. That's what I intend to do in an actual play, whether that ends up here or more likely over on the Patreon feed, because there is too much content to fit into this humble feed. That is Mythic Bastionland and a first look at it. I hope you are a bit more informed now if this is something you want to check out or not. At the very least, I can say it is a beautiful, interesting, well thought out product that is all contained in a single book with some novel mechanics and real creativity in there and enough procedure to work pretty well for solo by the look of it. I hope that you are getting games off your shelf, learning how to play them, and discovering these new stories as you go along and all the unexpected things that come with it. Keep an eye out for the interview with Chris, which will be coming next time on the Solo Role Players podcast. And until next time, if I don't hear from you by you reaching out to me at soloroleplayers@gmail.com or over on the Discord or on Reddit, you can find me under PJSack. But best is the email or the Discord. And if I don't hear from you, good luck with your solo roleplay. I hope you're having a good one. And I'll be back soon on the Solo Role Players podcast. Bye.